Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. With all this stuff going on with North Korea lately, it
Yeah,
feels like we really need to take a closer look. And luckily, you sent in some awesome research that I think covers everything we need.
it's definitely a lot to cover, for sure. But it's such an important topic.
Right, and it's changing so fast.
Yeah.
Just look at the last couple years
Exactly. Used to be more of a regional issue, but
with all their missile tests.
yeah, especially now that they can hit the U.S. mainland. It's
Global!
global, exactly.
That's a game changer.
Completely. And they're not being shy about it either.
No, I was reading that Kim Jong-un basically said, forget denuclearization.
That's right. Back in
Wow.
2022, he basically said, we're a nuclear power, and that's that.
Wow, so much for all that diplomacy, right?
Pretty much. And ever since then, they've just been ramping things up.
Yeah, over 30 missile tests just in the last 2 years.
More than 30.
I can't even keep up.
And it's not just the quantity, it's the types of missiles, too.
Oh, yeah, the ICBMs.
Those are the ones that can reach other continents, like the U.S.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a pretty clear message. And it's not just the missiles.
What else?
Their whole tone towards South Korea has changed. It's like
What do they even call them now?
they're calling them a hostile state. They've even threatened to subjugate them.
Subjugate. That's...
It's definitely aggressive language.
So what do you think? Are they bluffing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Is Kim Jong-un actually going to start a war?
Well, it's possible their actions could definitely be seen as preparations.
For war?
Right. Or it could be a really, really dangerous bluff.
To get what they want.
Exactly. There's this term for it, brinkmanship.
Brinkmanship.
Yeah, it basically means pushing things to the edge to see who backs down first.
Like a game of chicken.
Exactly. And with someone like Kim Jong-un who really knows what he's thinking,
It's scary not knowing.
definitely adds to the tension.
Sure.
So how do we deal with a country like this?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Is there even a right way?
Well, it helps to look at how different presidents have approached things in the past.
Okay, so what's Biden been doing?
So Biden's been working closely with South Korea's president, Yoon Suk-yeol.
Mm-hmm.
They're really focused on deterrence.
Deterrence.
Right.
Yeah.
The idea is to project strength, show a united front, and
That
basically...
makes sure North Korea knows we're not messing around.
Exactly. And they've been doing that in a few ways.
Like how?
More military exercises with South Korea, for one.
Right, and tougher sanctions to hit them where it hurts.
Yeah. Targeting their illegal activities like cybercrime and even arms dealing.
Oh, wow. And what about those strategic assets I keep hearing about?
Ah, yes. The strategic assets.
What are those, anyway?
Well, it's basically a fancy way of saying we're sending in the big guns.
Literally.
Pretty much we're talking nuclear-capable bombers, submarines.
Serious stuff.
Yeah, it's a way of saying, hey, we're ready for anything. Don't even think about it.
Okay, so that's Biden's approach. But didn't Trump try something completely different?
He did. And so did South Korea's president before Yoon Moon Jae-in.
Okay, so what was their strategy?
They were much more focused on dialogue and diplomacy.
Like hawking it out.
Exactly. They even offered North Korea things like unconditional humanitarian aid.
Really?
And they even suggested the possibility of economic help if they started denuclearizing.
Wow, so basically a carrot and stick approach.
You could say that.
But did it work?
Well, North Korea didn't give up their nukes, so...
Not really.
And now we're back to deterrence with Biden, but that doesn't seem to be working either.
So we're kind of stuck.
It seems that way, and what makes it even harder is that North Korea has gotten really good at the sanctions game.
The sanctions game?
Yeah. All those sanctions the U.S. and the UN have been putting on them for decades.
The ones targeting their trade and imports and everything?
Right, all that. It's like they found ways to survive and even thrive. Well, they've gotten really creative with things like cybercrime.
Cybercrime, like hacking and stealing money?
Exactly. And cryptocurrency theft, too. That's a big one.
Wow, they're basically tech-savvy criminals.
Pretty much. And there are even reports they've been selling weapons to Russia.
Seriously?
Yeah, which helps them make money and also undermines global security.
It's like a double whammy.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. For years, China and Russia kind of went along with the sanctions.
But now?
Now they're actively blocking any attempts to make them tougher.
Why would they do that?
It's complicated, but it basically gives North Korea more wiggle room.
And makes the sanctions less effective.
Exactly. It's a big shift in the power dynamics.
So what does all this mean for the U.S. and North Korea? Where do we go from here?
Well, to really understand that, we need to talk about the elephant in the room.
Which is?
North Korea's nuclear program and what they
Yeah.
plan to do with it. They say it's for self-defense, right?
Yeah, like they need to protect themselves from the U.S.
Right. But lately, they've been saying they might use nukes
For what?
Not just if someone nukes them,
Oh,
even if they feel threatened.
like a regular attack.
Exactly. Anything that puts the regime at risk.
That's terrifying. Are they serious?
It's impossible to know for sure, but even the hint of that,
Is scary.
it really raises the stakes because even if it's a bluff.
Someone could misinterpret it.
Exactly. And then things could escalate very quickly.
And we know they're not just talking.
Right. They've actually made a lot of progress with their nuclear program.
Like what?
Well, they've already conducted 6 nuclear tests.
6.
And they're still producing the material for more. They've been working on making smaller warheads.
Why smaller?
So they can fit them onto their long-range missiles.
The ones that can reach the U.S.?
Exactly. It's a pretty clear message.
So they really could do it if they wanted to.
It's certainly within the realm of possibility, which is what makes it so unnerving.
It's like trying to predict the unpredictable.
And that's the thing with a regime like North Korea. We just don't know how they'll react.
It makes you wonder what it's like for the people living there.
Oh, absolutely. They're the ones who suffer the most.
The research mentions some pretty horrific stuff about human rights abuses.
Yes. It's a really dire situation.
Like, what kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, there are these prison camps. Forced labor torture.
It's awful.
The UN even accused them of crimes against humanity back in 2014.
Wow. So what's the U.S. doing about that?
It's tricky because on the one hand, we want to pressure them to improve.
Yeah.
Too much pressure could backfire and make things even worse.
Like they could lash out.
Or the regime could collapse, and then who knows what would happen.
It's a tough situation for sure.
Definitely a moral dilemma as well.
So how much should we prioritize human rights when we're also dealing with a nuclear threat?
It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer.
It's easy to focus on the politics, but we can't forget about the people.
Absolutely. Their lives are at stake, and they have no control over any of this.
Speaking of control, Kim Jong-un is quite the character.
He is a bit of an enigma, isn't he?
What do we actually know about him?
Well, he took over pretty young after his father died in 2011. He solidified his power pretty quickly, got rid of any potential rivals, and he even tried some economic reforms early on.
Really? So he's not completely against change?
Well, those reforms haven't really gone anywhere lately.
Why not?
It's a combination of things: that sanctions, the pandemic, and just years of mismanagement.
So basically their economy's a mess.
And it's leading to some serious problems, especially food shortages.
So people are going hungry.
Millions of them. It's a really dire situation.
Do you think it could lead to instability?
It's possible there have been some reports of unrest and defections.
Like people trying to escape?
Exactly, and even rumors of dissent within the elite.
So maybe Kim Jong-un's grip isn't as strong as it seems.
It's hard to say, but it's definitely something to watch.
Especially with everything else going on, like the war in Ukraine.
That's right. It's added a whole new layer of complexity to the situation.
I mean, North Korea is supplying weapons to Russia.
It was a pretty shocking move.
I wonder what they're hoping to get out of it.
Well, it's likely a combination of factors.
Like?
Well, Russia can offer them economic aid, which they desperately need.
Right. And maybe some advanced weapons technology.
Exactly. And it also sends a message to the West.
Like, we're not going to play by your rules.
Exactly. It's a way of thumbing their noses at the international community.
So what does this mean for the U.S. and our allies?
It's definitely causing concern. It could prolong the war in Ukraine and make things even more unstable in Asia.
It feels like the whole world is shifting right now.
It's a time of great uncertainty, and the old ways of doing things might not work anymore.
Like we're entering a new era.
Exactly. And we need to be prepared to adapt to whatever comes next.
It's kind of overwhelming when you think about it. All these moving pieces and so much at stake.
Absolutely. And it really makes you wonder what the U.S. can actually do at this point.
Right. It feels like we've tried everything.
It is.
Sanctions, diplomacy, even threats.
And none of it seems to be working.
So what are we left with? Is military action the only option?
Well, nobody wants to go down that road, especially with a nuclear-armed North Korea.
Yeah, the risks are just too high.
But we can't forget about deterrence. That's still a key part of the strategy.
Right. All those military exercises and deployments, it's about sending a message.
Exactly. Showing North Korea that we're serious about defending ourselves and our allies.
But is that enough? I mean, can we really just keep playing this game of military one-upmanship?
It's not a sustainable solution in the long run.
So we need to keep talking.
Exactly. The door to dialogue should always be open.
But how do we do that without rewarding their bad behavior?
It's a tough balance, and it requires a lot of strategic thinking.
And maybe some help from China.
Oh, absolutely. China is the key player here.
They
have so much influence over North Korea. They're their biggest trading partner and ally.
So we need them on board.
If we want any kind of diplomatic solution to work.
Yeah. But that's going to be tough with all the tension between the U.S. and China right now.
Yeah, it's a complicated geopolitical landscape for sure.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been a real learning experience for me.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's such a complex issue, but I feel like I have a much better grasp on it now.
And for our listeners, I hope this has helped you understand the nuances of this situation.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, but it's important to remember
That there are real people whose lives are affected by all of this,
millions of North Koreans who are essentially trapped in this system.
with no say in their own future.
So as we continue to follow this story, let's not forget the human cost.
Absolutely remember, the family separated the freedoms, denied the hopes for a better life.
Well, that brings us to the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for sending in all that amazing research. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.